Hello, everybody. My name's Travis, and this is the Daily Travesty. And what I thought I would show you today is a little bit of gameplay for Flesh and Blood. Now, this is a program on a website called felttable.com. And what it lets you do is input deck lists and play against an AI. What you can also do if you don't have a deck list is you can come in here and select from a number of introductory decks, just very, very simple decks for basically every character, and try out a character or learn how to play the game. The reason why this program is really, really nice for new players is because playing the game of Flesh and Blood takes a lot of early learning about how to pitch your cards, what to keep, what to attack with, what to defend with, how to manage your hand. And although the AI on this program is very rudimentary, it does give you new situations every turn to try and navigate. Flesh and Blood is very turn to turn, I found, at least when you're new and inexperienced like I am. And so this is a really good program for learning that. You can also build different decks and try them out here before you go to your local game store to play. And it's a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play with a Blitz deck, which is the quicker format, 20 life aside, and about 30 minutes long is what the games are. And I'm just going to pick some characters from the first set. So I'm going to play as Bravo. That's the one I'm most comfortable with. And let's play a game against Dorinthia, I guess. I like Dorinthia as well. I've only been playing Flesh and Blood for about a month, a little bit more than a month. But I found that the first couple games, there's a lot of learning and a lot to take on all at once. And so what I'm hoping to do with these beginner games is show you some gameplay, narrate what's going on and why I'm making certain decisions, and hopefully that helps you. There is a ton of videos of gameplay on YouTube of people actually playing each other at higher levels with better decks than these. But the one thing I found about the gameplay videos that they struggle with is it's really hard to see what's going on and understand everything. Usually you can't see the people's hands. You're not listening to them talk through their plays and their thinking. You're basically passively watching or reactively watching, where you only see the plays they make, not why they made the plays. And even the really, really good commentators don't always have the ability to talk through that. So that's what we're going to do today. Like I said, I've only been playing about a month. If you're an experienced Flesh and Blood player, maybe these videos aren't for you. And there's definitely going to be things I say that probably aren't 100% correct. I'm also assuming that you've already seen a basic gameplay video, so you know a bit about what the cards do, but I will be talking through them. And one of the really nice things about this Felt Table website is that you can hover over cards and see them in the top right there. So I'll try to keep doing that throughout the stream here. We're playing as Bravo. Bravo's game plan is essentially to defend a lot, and every now and again is going to play a really, really big attack, hopefully giving it dominate. So that's what Bravo's hero ability says here. You can pay 2 resources to give your next big costed card, so something costs 3 or more, dominate, which means the opponent can only block with 1 card from hand, and you're likely to push some amount of damage through. A lot of Bravo's cards defend for a lot, so we see this blue Raging Onslaught defends for 3, pitches for 3. We've also got some nice defense reaction cards, which help us block our opponent's attacks, like this Unmovable. Here's another Unmovable, which blocks for 6 when we play it. And then there's also some nice combat tricks. Red Pummel, something people fear in Flesh and Blood, because if this hits you, you're taking an extra 4 damage, and you have to discard a card from your hand, which for those of you that know a little bit about Flesh and Blood, or you're just getting into it, basically any card you can make your opponent discard is 1 less card they have to attack you back with on their next turn. So it's a really good thing. We're going first here. You could set the program up to go first or second or random like I usually do. And before we get going here, I'll just quickly go through our cards again. So this is a Nothos. This is the hammer that Bravo usually uses. You have to pay 3 resources and you get to attack for 4, which is pretty good. But if you manage to do something else in your turn that discarded another like expensive card, this hammer actually attacks for 6, which is pretty sweet. Iron Rot Legs, pretty standard equipment. You get to use this once to block with for 1 point of damage. Same thing with the chest piece we have, the Iron Rot Plate. Normally you're not blocking with these just to soak up damage unless you're about to die. Usually you want to save your equipment until you really, really need it for a big turn, or if your opponent has an attack that has some other special effect. If it hits your hero, then you can supplement your blocks with your equipment. This helm is really, really nice in the Guardian decks, and it's cheap. It's a common. So if you're starting out with a Guardian character like Bravo, I suggest running this helm. It blocks for 1 at some point during the game, and then later on you can destroy it to get 1 extra card in your hand on a future turn, which is kind of nice. Last thing we have here is this Goliath Gauntlet. We can destroy this to give our next big attack +2, which is sweet. So one-time use. A lot of the items are one-time use, and you have to pick your spots. Anyway, let's get going. I'm not going to focus too much on the Dorinthia side. I'm basically just going to be reacting to what they do. But of course, once you get better at the game, you're going to want to pay more attention to what's going on your opponent's side. So we get to go first, and I think based on the hand we have, there's 2 options. We can swing in just for 4 with our hammer, and our opponent's going to be able to block that kind of no problem. So what we do want to try and do is get this Anothos up to 6 power, and I think the way that we're going to do it is we are going to activate Bravo's ability. Now, this is not going to affect our hammer attack, but what it's going to do, it's going to give us the opportunity to put an extra card into our pitch zone, which is where the cards you use for resources go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that. I'm going to get rid of one of these cards that cost at least 3 or more, like maybe this unmovable. And then I'm going to click on the Anothos to attack with it. Now, normally this card would attack for 4, but because I have 2 cards in my pitch zone that each have a cost of 3 or more, it's actually attacking for 6. We can see our opponent blocking here with 2 cards, each with 3 defense. And this is a great time to use Pummel. On the first turn of the game, the discard effect doesn't really matter all that much because after the first turn in Flesh and Blood, both players drop to 4. But on future turns, if you can get your opponent to discard cards, it's really impactful on the game. That being said, this is Blitz. We do want to try and deal damage to our opponent. And this is basically a free 4 points of damage. So that's something I'm considering. We could also just not play this Pummel and save it for a future turn, but I think I'm going to play it right now. Okay, and our opponent actually got us there. So I played an attack reaction, this Pummel. It's kind of like a combat trick if you're familiar with Magic terms. And then in response to that, our opponent played a defense reaction, which is kind of like a defensive combat trick. So we didn't actually deal any damage there. So we kind of got wrecked by our opponent. I mean, we're both still at 20 life. We both used the same number of cards, but we didn't gain anything. One of the things about Flesh and Blood, at the end of your turn, anything you pitched goes to the bottom of your deck and you get to choose the order. That does get pretty important, especially in Blitz, because you're likely to cycle through your deck at least once. Here, I don't know if it's going to matter that much. I don't really want both of these defense reactions together because they cost resources to play. So I'm going to try and split those up. So this looks fine to me. And I'll draw my 4. My opponent's going to draw up to 4 as well. And now they get their turn. And now any card you play to defend with, you don't get your next turn to attack with. So anything we use to defend with, we're going to have to be a little bit careful about keeping enough resources to actually pressure our opponent back. So the opponent's playing a bunch of stuff. They're going to come in for 6. They don't have any other cards in their hand. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about Dorinthia right now, but basically they're going to hit me for 6. And the way Dorinthia works is if they hit us with this once, which means they deal damage to us, they might be able to attack with it a second time by using a piece of their equipment. So anyway, I don't really want to take 6 damage. Now, this attack is dominated. That's the thing that we're trying to do. What that means is we can only defend with 1 card from our hand. So this is kind of going to hit us regardless. So I want to block as much of this as I can. I'm going to pick one of my cards that blocks for 3. I can see this Debilitate blocks for 3 in the bottom right corner there. The Buckling Blow blocks for 3. The Disable blocks for 3. And this Slogism only blocks for 2. So I don't really want to defend with that. Any card I use to defend with is gone forever. It goes to the discard pile. So I'm going to pick the one that I think I need the least, which is probably this buckling blow. So I'm just going to block with that. If I could, I would block with 2 cards to not take any damage, but I can't do that. And I don't think this is like impactful enough on the game to want to block with my equipment yet. So I'm just going to take the 3 damage here. Go down to 17. And my opponent is going to attack again. They had 1 resource left, and now they're attacking for 4. And now I really want to block all the damage on this card. Dawnblade, what it does is if it ever hits you, so if it deals damage to you more than once a turn, at the end of the turn, it gets a permanent +1 counter, essentially. Semi-permanent. And the Dawnblade can really spiral out of control if you don't keep those counters in check. My opponent is playing 1 resource to attack for 3, but if this gets a counter, all of a sudden it's 1 resource to attack for 4 or 1 resource to attack for 5 after a couple bad turns. So I definitely want to block this. Now the attack is dominated, so we can only block with 1 card from hand, like this Debilitate. Okay, I can't select another card from hand, but this is a really, really good time when I might choose to use my equipment to block. Okay. All the damage in Flesh and Blood is like trample damage from Magic, if you're familiar with Magic. So I'm blocking for 3. My opponent's attack has 4 power. I'm going to take 1 damage, and they're going to get a +1 permanent or semi-permanent +1 counter to the Dawnblade. I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to block with a piece of my equipment. Now, Helm of Isen's Peak is a nice one to block with early because it does have an extra ability later on that requires you to destroy the helm. So if you can get the benefit of blocking with it and then later getting the action off of it, that's great. Some equipment doesn't let you do that. As an example, I mean, this Ironrot Plate, it doesn't have any other abilities, but you'll notice it says Blade Break. If you defend with this, then you destroy it. So you really only get 1 crack at this. Same with the Ironrot Legs. They have Blade Break. If you defend with it, then you destroy it at the end of the turn. The Helm, if we defend with it, it gets a -1 defense counter, bringing its defense to 0. But then in a later turn, we can still use it for its effect. It doesn't get destroyed right away when we block with it. So I'm going to throw that in. My defense is now 4. Their attack is 4. And they're not going to get any more damage through this turn. And they're not going to get a +1 counter on their Dawnblade. Opponent draws up to 4. We do not draw at the start of our turn. And so those 2 cards we used to block with are no longer available to us. We only have these ones left over. Now, what we could do is the same thing we did last time. We could pitch a blue card to activate Bravo's ability, and then pitch another blue card to swing with the hammer for 6. There's some reasons we might not choose to do that, but I think I'm just going to show that play pattern for right now. So even though we don't actually get the benefit of the Dominate, because this ability only affects action cards, and your weapons don't count as cards from hand, we can still do this little trick to make our hammer swing for 6 instead of 4. So let's do that. We're swinging for 6 now. And if the opponent wants to block, they have to use some cards from their hand, which they won't have to hit us later. So they block for 4. This card is a defense reaction. It does cost resources to play, but it's a little bit better than just blocking with a card. In this case, they're blocking 4, and they actually deal 1 damage to us because we attacked with a weapon. All right, so we pass the turn. We get to decide which cards go to the bottom. I probably want this Disable a little bit earlier than the Slogism, which isn't as good of a card. So I'm going to put the Disable first. And then I draw my 4, and I get to see what I'm going to be able to defend with and potentially attack with the turn after. So the opponent coming in with Dawnblade again for 3 damage. Oh, 6 damage based on the pump card they played, this Sharpened Steel. But my opponent doesn't have any more resources left. They have no cards in hand. They don't have any other floating resources, any floating pitch left over. So I know that this is their entire turn. Their entire turn is swinging for 6. So now that I've seen what my opponent's doing and I have perfect information this turn, I can take my time and I can figure out what I'm going to do. I really want to get aggressive against my opponent. And the best way to do that is to probably play one of my big attacks, like this Disable. It attacks for 9, but it takes a whole lot of resources to do that. I could also play this Cranial Crush, which attacks for 8. Bravo's cards or Guardian cards have this special ability called Crush. And if the card itself deals 4 more damage to a hero, there's some additional effect. So you can see this Cranial Crush. They can't draw cards during their turn, essentially. They still get to draw up to hand size at the end of the turn, so it's not like you completely destroy them. But if you're playing against an opponent who draws cards in the middle of their turn, this could be nice. Disable, if it crushes them, they have to put their arsenal away. We haven't used the arsenal yet. Basically, it's like an extra slot where you can save a card if you have a card left over at the end of your turn. Our opponent doesn't have a card in arsenal, so really this is just deal 9 damage. But remember that if we give this card Dominate off of Bravo's ability, using this 2-costed action, they can only block with 1 card from hand, which means that they're probably only going to be able to block 3 of this damage, and we might be able to deal 6 to them. That's pretty nice. That being said, this card does cost 5 to play, so we're going to have to keep at least 2 of our other blue cards to throw away for resources. I don't know if I really want to take that much damage. I don't really want to take 6 damage from them to deal 6 damage back. I think my deck is a little bit better at being defensive. So what I'm going to do this turn is I'm actually going to block with this Staunch response. This is a defense reaction. It costs resources. You have to pay resources to play this. And it's going to block for 5. But I have the ability to pay extra resources to make it block for 8. And I think that's what I'm going to do this turn. Now, the reason I'm going to do this as opposed to just blocking with, say, like these 2 cards with 3 defense each and moving on, is that I expect this game, during this game, we're going to be the defensive deck and our opponent is going to be attacking us a lot. And Dorinthia uses a lot of cards every turn. And one of the things about Flesh and Blood is that you can run out of cards. You don't die instantly like you do in Magic if you run out of cards, but if you can't draw cards, you can't defend, you can't attack, and so you basically lose the game. And it might come down to that with us against this Dorinthia deck if we can't gain the upper hand. It's called fatiguing in Flesh and Blood. So it might be the best strategy right now to try and fatigue our opponent, right? I don't really see good options here. The only attack option we have is to play this Disable. But in order to do that, we have to keep so many cards in our hand that we're going to take some damage off of Dawnblade. Maybe that's better. That's the thing about Flesh and Blood is there's so many different options every turn that there's many, many different lines of play, and some are going to be better than others. Like we could block for 3 off of, say, this Cranial Crush, and then keep the other 2 blue cards to attack with Disable without Dominate. But then our opponent can block with a bunch of cards, and maybe we didn't really get anywhere. We could block with both of these for 6, and then just attack for 4 with the hammer next turn, getting rid of this blue card here. And then we could put the Disable in the arsenal. Maybe that's better. I'm not really sure what to do, but I think for now, well, actually, now I've changed my mind because we haven't seen the arsenal yet, and this is an instructional video, kind of. So let's do that instead. So what I'm going to do is I am going to defend with these 2 cards. They each have a defense value of 3 in the lower right corner. So when we add them up, that gets to 6. I block all the damage, and then I pass the turn. Okay, my opponent draws up to 4, and my turn's pretty simple now. I'm just going to attack with my hammer, pitching my last blue card, which gives me 3 resources. I'm attacking for 4. It's not super threatening, but it is a little bit of damage. And if the opponent decides that they want to keep their whole hand, they're going to take 4 points of damage, which is fine by me. Now that my turn is done, at the end of the turn, I have 1 card left in my hand, and I can choose to put this in Arsenal. Basically, that means I'm going to put it face down, and the only thing I can use this for, if it's face down in the arsenal, is attacking, or for its effect. I can no longer use this card to defend with, and I can't pitch it away to get resources. But I'm okay with that, because this Disable, this red Disable, is a card that I do want to attack with. in a future turn. So I'm fine putting it in the arsenal. So it goes face down behind my hero, and I get to draw 4 new cards. And the nice thing about this is it's kind of like having 5 cards in your hand. And so what I really want to do is I want to be able to attack with the disable. It's going to cost 5 resources. I would really like to be able to dominate it, which means I have to use Bravo's ability, which costs 2 resources. 5 plus 2 is 7. So I need to keep 7 resources worth of cards, and each of these is 3. So I have to keep 3 cards back, basically. Okay, this is a huge attack. Our opponent is attacking for 11 right now. They played a whole bunch of cards to pump it up. Again, we're not really paying too much attention to them, but now we're going to consider what's happening. So on Felt Table, you can come up here and see what all the buffs were. Plus 3 power, plus 2 power, plus 3 power. Go again on hit. That's something that we are really, really worried about. If our opponent doesn't hit with this, like if we block all 11 points of damage, that's it. That's the end of their turn. Nothing else happens. If they deal even 1 point of damage to us with this attack, because of this card that they played, this Warrior's Valor, they're going to get to go again. They have 1 resource floating, 1 resource that they haven't used yet, which I can see right here. Not the card I'm hovering over, but literally where the mouse is circling. They have 1 resource left, and they're going to be able to attack with the Dawnblade again. So I think I probably want to block this 11 points of damage. I mean, it's also going to kill me or take me down pretty far if I don't. So now I think I'm just going to defend this turn. I was talking about attacking with the disable and how I might do that. I'm not doing that anymore. Based on what my opponent is presenting to me, I'm just going to block. Now each of these cards blocks for 3. So this is 3, 6, 7, 8 I can block. I also have this defense reaction Unmovable, which blocks for 5, but I have to pay the cost of it in order to block with it. So I have to pay 3 resources to block. So let's say I block with Unmovable. I have to pitch 3. So I'm going to pitch the Slogism because it has the least defense. So I'm not going to defend with this card. And then I can also defend with these 2 cards for 3 each. So what I need to do is I need to declare my defense cards first. So I'm going to defend with both of these for 6. Pass. Now it goes to priority to my opponent. They can play attack reactions, attack combat tricks. They don't have any. Now it goes to me. I can play defensive reactions, defense combat tricks. I'm going to choose to do that. And I have to pay 3 resources to play this one. Okay, we get up to 11. We do not allow the Warrior's Valor on hit effect to go through, which means that's going to be the end of the turn. We are out of cards, right? Our opponent ran us out of cards. That's okay. That's going to happen sometimes. And again, I told you that for this matchup, I think I'm a more defensive deck. I'm basically content to keep blocking, make my opponent come to me, and we can already see that their deck is smaller than ours, right? We both started with 40 cards. I have 31 cards left in my deck. They're at 26. I mean, I'm going to draw my hand here, but all things considered, we're actually ahead on cards. And if we keep making those kinds of exchanges, eventually our opponent's going to have 0 cards in their deck. We're going to have more than 0. And at that point, our plan is just to attack with this hammer every turn. If you're attacking with weapons, you're not actually spending cards from your deck because you're just using them for resources. Okay, let's see what our opponent has for us this time. All right, they're attacking for 4 with Go Again, so we know there's going to be something else coming after this. We actually don't have a great hand. We have a whole bunch of red cards, which are great to attack with, but they aren't great for using for resources. So I'm okay getting rid of one of these cards to block with. This one seems like it might be pretty good against them to actually use, because if it crushes them, it makes their sword worse for a turn. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to block with this. Now, they're going to deal 1 damage to us. I'm actually okay with that. I don't want to use my equipment or another card here because there's no other effects. Basically, they're going to deal 1 damage. That's fine. This Scar for Scar card, it doesn't have any other abilities when it hits. It doesn't have any on-hit effects, is what we would call it. So I'm content to take 1 damage here. I take 1, I go down to 15, that's fine. And with their Go Again, they're going to swing with the Dawnblade. And they're going to have a ton of resources. Look at this. They're attacking for 3. They have 2 resources floating and 2 cards in hand. So I have to be pretty careful here. I have to be pretty suspicious that my opponent has some other cards they're going to use. And Dorinthia tends to have a lot of attacking combat tricks, ways to pump up their sword. And I don't really want them to do that. So I think what I'm going to do here is probably block with multiple cards. That might seem a little weird, especially, well, maybe that's bad. I don't know. Even though we decided to try and fatigue the opponent, this is really suspicious to me, because if let's just say I block for 3 here, they are likely to have a card in their hand that makes this attack for 6 or more. And if they can play it, it kind of defeats the purpose of blocking. They're going to probably get to go again, attack us again with the Dawnblade. So I think what I want to do is I want to block with more cards from my hand. This is called overblocking. I'm just expecting my opponent has 1 combat trick. And if they play it now and they get +3, for example, then they kind of wasted a card. If they have 2 combat tricks, I still get wrecked a little bit. If they have a card that gives them +4, which isn't super common, but it might exist, I get wrecked, but you can only do so much. And I really want to keep at least 1 card back that can help me attack with the hammer. So I'm going to keep at least 1 blue so I can attack with the hammer next turn and keep up a little bit of pressure on my opponent. So let's see what happens. We're going to block for 6. Okay, and the opponent says that's fine. So they put 1 card into their arsenal. Now, we kind of wasted an extra card there, it looks like, but I think we stopped them from dealing a whole bunch of damage to us. And we still get to crack back with our hammer by getting rid of this blue card. Okay, they use a defensive reaction. They block for 4. That's totally fine. And we will draw up. And our deck sizes are equal again. So the fatigue plan doesn't really seem to be working that much. They're coming in for 4 damage with go again. So regardless of what we do, they're going to get to make another play after this. I'm going to play the same way I did as last time. And I'm actually going to block with, well, I already have a red attack card that's pretty good in my arsenal that I want to use. So I think I might block with this red card. Now, you might look at that and be like, why are you blocking with the red card? Those ones have more attack than the blues. But the thing about the Bravo deck is you really want a lot of blue cards left in your deck, because every single blue card can help your hammer attack all by itself, right? It pitches for 3 resources. The hammer costs 3 resources to attack with. If I kept the red card around, there could be a time where I draw this and I don't have enough resources to attack my opponent, because the red cards only give you 1 resource if you use them for resources. So I might actually block with this red card. I don't think I'm going to need it. I already have a different red attack that I might use at some point. So I'm just going to block for 3. And again, I'm fine letting 1 damage through. There's no other effects that this is going to have on me. Okay, and they did have a combat trick. Look at that. So last turn, we overblocked so they couldn't play this Razor Reflex. This turn, the opponent's doing it. They're going to deal extra damage to us, but there's no really additional effect to this turn. They get go again, but they already had go again, so it doesn't really matter. So I think we played correctly last turn, in summary. I'm sorry if this is like all over the place. This game can be pretty complicated, pretty technical, and that's why I'm making these videos. All right, here we have Dawnblade coming in for 3. We could, again, play around a trick in their hand. It's possible they have something here, but unlike last turn, they don't have any resources left. So if they wanted to do something like attack with Dawnblade a second time, they would need to use this card for resources. So I'm not really scared of a combat trick here. If they use it, if they use their turn to deal extra damage, that's fine. Okay, so they did. So they gave it +3, but that's sort of the end of their turn. So they played a card, they dealt 3 extra damage to us. That's going to happen sometimes. And now we have 2 cards left in our hand. And I think what we'll do is we'll keep doing the fatigue strategy. So I'm going to pitch to Bravo's ability, which does nothing except allow me to attack for 6 with the hammer. I didn't use any of these cards. They're pitched, so they'll go to the bottom of my deck. And that means that my deck size will be bigger than my opponent's, and we could eventually fatigue them out. And I don't really care what order these ones go in. Sometimes it matters. Right now it doesn't matter. So, all right. So we've drawn some cards. Opponent attacking for 4 here. And our life total is getting kind of low. We're down to 8, and I don't really want to get blown out by some tricks and stuff. Although I guess we do have this unmovable. I would really like to get the disable out of my arsenal. Arsenals are great for saving cards you plan on playing, and I would really like to, instead of having an attack here, have this like defense reaction there. Coming in for 4, hey, and they do not have go again. Scar for Scar only gives you an extra action if you have less life than your opponent, but our opponent's at 12 and we're at 8. So this is the only thing they're doing this turn. So I think I might actually take this damage. Let's see what we can do. If we take the damage, we can pay 2 for Bravo and 5 for Disable to swing for 9 with Dominate. And how do we get to 7 resources? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we can pitch all 3 of these cards, dominate a disable, attack in. They'll take about 6 damage. And then we can put this defense reaction into our arsenal. Alternatively, we can block with like maybe this buckling blow or something. And then can we still attack? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So maybe that's something we would think about doing as well. Maybe we block 3 of the damage and we can still attack with the disable, but we won't have an arsenal. I'm not really sure which of those is better, but I think taking less damage right now is better. I assume this deck doesn't really have ways to gain life. Sometimes you build your deck around gaining life. I think this deck probably doesn't gain that much life. So we do want to keep our life total high. And now we actually do have enough resources still to do what we said. So let's use Bravo's ability. We're going to give our attack Dominate, pitching all of our cards. And now we're swinging for 9. They can only block with 1 card from hand. And they do that. So they're going to take 6 damage. We just cut our opponent's life total in half. That was pretty good. And now we pass. Our pitch cards go to the bottom. I think in this situation, I might actually move the defense reaction closer to the top. If our plan is to block, I want to be able to block really well, and I want to do that sooner. So I'm going to move that closer to the top. Again, these 3 cards are at the bottom of the deck, but we're going to draw this defense reaction, a turn sooner than we would if we put it at the bottom. All right, we do have a way to gain life in this deck. The Blessing of Deliverance is a way to gain life. It's kind of delayed by a turn. But okay, so what happened there? Our opponent is attacking for 5, but in order to attack with this card, they had to show us a card from their hand, and they showed us an Iron Song response, a blue one. So they showed us a blue version of this card. This card gives +3 to an attack. The blue one gives +1. So we know that they can give +1 to an attack. Just something we need to be aware of later on. So maybe I'm just blocking for 6 here. If I block for 5, they can give it +1. But then it really only deals 1 extra damage to us and they waste a whole card. What does this do? This only makes weapon attacks potentially get go again. So I think I might actually just block for 5 here. My plan is to play Blessing of Deliverance on my turn. I kind of take a turn off when I do that, but it allows me to gain a bit of life later on. It'd be really nice if one of my blue cards had 3 cost or greater. Like this Staunch Response only costs 2 to play. The Pummel only costs 2 to play. If I had a card that costs 3 to play, I could actually play the Blessing draw a card, and then maybe even attack with the hammer, which is a pretty nice turn. Alternatively, I could block for 2. Well, I guess I could block all 5 with the staunch response. Oh no, that doesn't really, never mind, sorry. I could block for 2, take 3, maybe swing back. This is kind of a tough situation. Again, this happens all the time in Flesh and Blood because my opponent's at pretty low life and I don't really want to just block and let them have another turn. I want to keep as much pressure on them as I can. Not because they'll take damage, but because they'll have to block with cards from hand, which means that they can be less aggressive against me. This is kind of a tough situation. I think in this situation... Okay, I think we are actually going to block here. I'm not going to defend with a card for its defense value. I am going to use this defense reaction, though. So I have to pass the first round of blocking, and now I can use my combat trick. And I have to use the pummel to pay for it. There's so many different ways to figure out how to play your hand in these games that it can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Okay, I'm just paying the base cost of this. It's going to block for 5. Our opponent arsenals a combat trick. We know that this is a +1 to an attack. Something we'll have to remember. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my helm. Remember we blocked with this earlier, so it has no defensive value anymore, but because I don't have good cards to get resources from, I only have 2 red cards in my hand. This is basically the only thing I can do with my turn. So I'm going to activate it. What this does, it's going to let me draw an extra card this turn. And I'm going to put the Blessing of Deliverance into my arsenal so that on a future turn, if all I have left in my hand is a single blue card, I could play this out, maybe attack with my hammer and eventually gain a little bit of life. So we're going to get to draw 5 here. That's sad. We draw a whole bunch of reds. I'm probably just going to end up blocking with all these red cards, and I'm going to save the blue card to use the Blessing of Deliverance that I put in my arsenal. Okay, here's a good time where we might want to consider overblocking. This is Snatch. It deals 4, and if it deals any damage to the opponent, they get to draw a card. But we do know that they have a +1. And this has Go Again because of the Quicken token. Again, I'm not paying too much attention to her side of the field right now. Just trust me when I say they have Go Again. So this is a card I want to block, and I want to block for at least 5 because I know they can give +1 based on the card in the arsenal. And I kind of have to assume they have another trick in hand that can give +3. So I'm not blocking for 4. I'm not blocking for 5. I'm kind of blocking for 8 here, which is quite a lot. That's going to use quite a few of our resources, but that's the strategy, especially when you play against Dorinthia. You just kind of have to block a whole bunch. So I'm actually going to block for 9 because those are the values I have. I really want to keep my blue so that I can play this Blessing of Deliverance next turn and maybe gain some life. So I'm going to pass on that and overblock a whole bunch and see what happens here. Okay, and they had a whole bunch of buff attacks. So we're going to actually get attacked for quite a bit here. 8. Yeah, another 8. And this one has Go Again as well, which means that if they hit with this, they're going to get to attack with the Dawnblade again. And obviously, I don't want to die. I have 7 life, and this is attacking for 8. So we know that if we don't block 8 this turn, they're going to get to attack for another 3. And that's not good. So I think, again, we're just going to block everything. And this is where having the equipment helps a lot. Oh, except we have to block for 9 because we know this is a +1. So we're kind of in a tough spot regardless of what we do. Wow, this is really tough. I kind of wish I hadn't blocked for 9 on the first attack now. Maybe I should have just blocked for 6. Well, I definitely made a mistake there. So if we block 6, they hit us for 2, they hit us for 3. We take 5 total, go down to 2, and don't have a turn. We can block 3, take 5, and then block the next 3. And that prevents them from getting a counter. That's probably the best, right? All right, I'm just going to take the 6. Okay, taking 6 damage here, going down to 1. And then they're going to attack for 3 again. But now I can block this 3 with my other card so they don't get a +1 counter on their Dawnblade. And we're at 1, which is kind of scary because the opponent's deck has cards that can like ping us for 1 damage. Steel Blade Shunts, these cards. So if we ever attack our opponent with a weapon attack, we have to be scared that they might just play one of these cards and kill us. So when we're trying to decide, oh, I just have to pass and draw. When we're trying to decide what to attack with, it might be better for us to use cards to attack rather than our weapon for that reason. But anyway, let's see what our opponent has for us this turn. Looks like a whole bunch of buffs. And yeah, swinging for 8. Again, we kind of have to think that they have a +3 attack here. And we definitely don't want this card to hit. So we kind of need to block for 11 on this, which is insane to me. This blocks for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We might have to block with some equipment this turn. But if we block, yeah, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Ugh. Feels bad, but I really don't want to get hit by this. And again, we're trying to run our opponent out of cards. So block, block, block. This is blocking for 6. And then we're also going to use this defense reaction. So we pass to them, and then we block for 11 total. The reason we're blocking for 3 over is because most cards that are good, they attack for 3, they block for 3, they might add 3 to your attack. Notice some of the other stuff our opponent has played, like the Razor Reflex adds 3 to an attack. The Iron Sun Response adds 3 to an attack. The Sharpened Steel adds 3 to an attack. So we're kind of dealing with math based around 3s here. And we're going to block out. But look at this. Our opponent's deck still a little bit smaller than ours. And what we're really hoping is just to keep defending until they run out of cards at this point. All right, here they come in for 3. Okay, they're coming in for 3 damage. I have a defense reaction in hand. So if they try to use combat tricks this turn, I can use a combat trick in response. So here I'm just going to block for 3 with one of my blue cards and see if we can bait them into using their combat tricks. Yeah, there's the Razor Reflex. They're going to try and kill us. So now we have to use our combat trick. And we block on them and hope that they don't kill us. Okay, well, we would get hit for 4. We can block for 3 plus 1 from our armor. That's why we saved our armor. And okay, we survive another turn. We are very far behind though. We are definitely not winning this game. We're at 1. All our armor is gone now, and our opponent hasn't given up the attack at all. And now we have some of our weaker cards. So we are just going to be doing everything we can to block at this point and hope we can save 1 card in our deck to attack back with. Okay, so opponent's attacking for 4. They do have Go Again because of the cards they played. Can we beat a combat trick? We do have a defense reaction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block the 4 with 2 cards. And if they play a combat trick, I can still save myself. If they don't play a combat trick, I have 2 blues in hand, and I might actually get to play this Blessing and gain some life. So let's do this. They do have Go Again. So we are going to get attacked for exactly 5. And now the only thing we can do is play our Staunch Response to block for 5. So let's see if that's going to be enough. Okay, awesome. So we survived that round. Again, this is such a close game here, but we're definitely behind. We haven't been able to play anything for like 6 turns because our opponent is just hammering us with attacks. And they pass the turn. That's really interesting. They decided to play this energy potion for 0, but that takes their whole turn to do that, which means that maybe they're setting up for a really big turn next turn. And this is our opportunity. We basically have to come back this turn and try and put them on the back foot. We want to try and kill them if we can. We want them to use as many resources as they need to or as they have to. I do want to try and gain some life if I can. I want to get this Blessing of Deliverance out of my arsenal. So now that we have a full hand, let's look at what we're going to do. If we play Blessing of Deliverance with a card that costs 3 or greater, so pretty much all our cards, we're going to get to draw a card. And we have Go Again. So let's say we play Blessing of Deliverance using this Debilitate. We can draw a card, have Go Again, and then we would have enough resources to play Cranial Crush, which the opponent has to block with at least one card if they don't want to die. We could even use our Gauntlet this turn so that they have to block with at least 2 cards if they don't want to die, which gets more cards out of their hand. I think we want to try and get as many cards out of our opponent's hand as possible. So that's going to be my turn. I'll walk you through it. First things first, I want to play Blessing of Deliverance. I want to draw the card, which means I have to pitch a card that costs 3 or more. I'm going to pitch Debilitate. Draw a card. Ooh, this is actually nice. This is a combat trick. It's one of the weaker versions of Pummel, or I mean, it's the weakest version of Pummel, but it can still do some good work against your opponent. Okay, next thing we're going to do, well, does that change our math? Is there a way that we can play a big attack and pummel them? If we play Cranial Crush, we have to pay 6, and we currently have 1 plus Disable is 4 plus Unmovable is 6. And then we have the pummel left over, but we can't afford it. If we play Disable for 5, we currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 1 resource left over. Can't play the pummel. Okay. So we're not going to be able to play this pummel on top of a attack action card. Can we play the pummel on top of a hammer? Yes. We could pitch a blue, swing for 6 with a Nothos, and hope that they block with a 2 defense card. No, that doesn't seem very powerful. Most of our opponent's cards are going to block for 3. This is pretty intricate. I think we just try and go for max damage. So I'm going to play the Cranial Crush, and I want it to deal as much damage as it possibly can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Goliath Gauntlet. This is the only turn I can use it because it gets destroyed. And it's going to give my attack +2 this turn. Can we dominate one of these? Actually, that's a good question as well. This costs 8 if we want to dominate it with Bravo. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We could actually attack for 10 with Dominate. If they block for 3, they take 7 and they lose. That's pretty good. Maybe we're supposed to use the Dominate ability on Bravo. I think we might have to go for that. Okay, first things first. Buff up our attack, give it +2. Next thing we're going to do is activate Bravo so that our big attack has Dominate. The opponent can only block with 1 card from hand. We have to pay resources for this. And then we're going to attack with Cranial Crush. And we have to spend all of our remaining resources for this. And we're going to attack for 10. Dominate. They can only block with 1 card from hand. Oh, and they had this Steel Blade Shunt. Look at that. So if we had attacked with our hammer, our weapon, they could have used this defense reaction and killed us instantly. They could have dealt 1 damage to us. But because we didn't attack with a weapon, we attacked with one of our cards, which is what we had talked about before. This just blocks for 4, but it doesn't ping us. And so we actually ended up winning that game with our massive Cranial Crush. That's awesome. We managed our defense pretty well. We used our armor for very efficient blocks or very critical turn blocks. and we waited essentially for our opponent to stumble, right? They were hitting us, they were hammering every single turn, and we just kept blocking. And on that last turn, they took a turn off to play the energy potion. They let us keep all of our cards in hand, and that's when we decided to strike, and we were able to get them. They could only block 4 of the 10, and they died exactsies, right? They took exactly 6. So that's awesome. That's a little bit about how you might choose to play the Bravo deck against Dorinthia. Just very defensive. I hope I was able to describe some of the thought process I had for my turns well enough that you got some value out of it. It's a pretty simple game, but also a complicated game at the same time. I think the mechanics in Flesh and Blood are really simple. They're very approachable. But what's exciting about this game is that at any given moment in time, there's like 3, 4, 5, 10 different ways to play your hand and respond to the situations. And that's where a lot of the strategic benefit and nuance comes in, and a lot of the fun. So I hope you got a little bit out of this. I'm going to stop for now, but I'm hoping to make more videos like this. And if there's specific heroes you want to see, just let me know, and I'll throw them into the felt table and we'll play some more games. Anyway, that's it for now. This has been the Daily Travesty. Thanks so much for hanging out. We'll see you later.